there is some level of victim you're subscribing to. And if you're willing to look that in the face and take complete ownership that you are believing that story, you are believing that you're a victim, things can really start to change.
This is Becoming, the podcast for leaders to think differently with actionable tips in 30 minutes or less to claim your intuition, your influence, and your agency. And finally, get to the truth of what stands between you and who you are meant to become. Many of us believe that once we become that future self, then we will be happy, successful, and complete. This podcast exists to shine a light on the truth that the time is now and your future self can be who you become today. Let's dive in.
Welcome to Becoming, episode 1, Addiction to Awakening. Welcome, my friends. As I'm recording this, I am really just taking in this amazing opportunity to share with you these teachings and this truth that has resonated so much with me in my journey. And I'm excited to see what you think of it and how you see it applying to your journey, your life, your business, and give me that feedback. Share with me how you apply this. So as we dive in today, I'm doing a series for you and starting this podcast with Addiction to Awakening, because it is my core belief that if we can see first where we are and bring truth to that, to see the truth, that we can be free to create, but more importantly, free to become. And that is why I titled the podcast Becoming, is because I want to share with you the abundance of ideas and knowledge and tips and tricks that I have in my pursuit of becoming so that you can become all that you are made to be. We are creators of our own life, and this podcast is to serve you, to inspire you, and to really challenge the thoughts and ideas that you've thought are true so that you can become awakened, right? Have that space to create. And so as I planned out this series, Addiction to Awakening, I want to start today's episode with this idea. And the idea is that you are the problem and you are also the solution. And if you're willing to try that on, if you are willing to adopt that thought process, right, that you are the problem, meaning that the problems and things in your life you do not like, that on some level you created them, on some level you had a hand in them, on some level you are a part of them, right? Because they're yours, right? Our problems are personal. The foundation of the problem might not be, but they're ours from our perception. So you are the problem. And when I say you are also the solution, what I mean by that is that if you created the problem, on some level you have the power to make it different. And so as we start each episode, I want you to come to these episodes with that frame of mind. You are the problem, but you are also the solution. And we are going to dive in to the truth of these problems together with compassion, with humility, with so much love. And we are going to build the pathway to what you want to become. So let's dive in. So this first episode is truly the mothership of this series, because what I'm going to talk to you about today is really setting the table, right? It is setting the stage so that everything else we talk about as it relates to addiction to awakening is relatable, right? You can connect and you can see how each addiction of the 8 addictions, I believe, are what we all are plagued with on some level. You can see that those all relate to each other. That when I talk about one addiction, you're going to hear feathers of the other. And so together, when we put these all together, they create space enough for you to make a new choice and change. So I believe there's 8 addictions. And today we're going to dive into the number one addiction that when we stack the rest on them, you're going to experience freedom, fulfillment, and be able to start making lasting change. So remember, the premise of this podcast is to speak about the root of what is going on, the root of truth, because when we can see the root of something, we can start to change. When we see the root of something, we can't unsee it, right? It's kind of like when you turn the light on and you see the spot on the carpet. You can't unsee that. It's going to be at the forefront of your attention no matter what until you address the spot on the carpet. Similarly, the goal of this podcast is to highlight the root. The root of something, when we see it, we can't unsee it, right? And so the idea is we're going to highlight the root so that you can see it. And when you see it, something in your brain is activated, and that something is the reticular activating system. When that is fired, it's all you can see, right? Take the car that you've been wanting to buy. When you get honed in on the color of the car, you see it everywhere, right? It's like all of a sudden everyone drives that red Toyota. All of a sudden everyone drives that blue Range Rover. That's your reticular activating system. And so my goal in this episode and the following episodes is to really get your reticular activating system fired up. Because when we do, you're going to see the truth. You won't be able to unsee it. And that, my friend, is going to lead you to change. And not just symptomatic change, but true root, uncovering deep change that's going to last a lifetime. So when your reticular activating system is fired, then what happens is the stimulus of the truth we're going to talk about activates that reticular activating system. And guess what happens? Before you respond, you have a little more space to think through, wow, I have been showing up at this person, or I have been doing this. I have been acting this way. When you have that space from stimulus, which is us pointing out the truth, in between stimulus and response, you have choice. That's where your freedom lies, right? And so that's where we then together can craft and design the pathway to creating the change you want so that you can become who you're meant to be, the goal of this podcast, so that you can get out of reaction and not stay there anymore. So we first must see what the mind is working on, right? We first must see that on some level, we're all operating unconsciously. We're unconsciously addicted to ways of being. And if we highlight and dive into these ways of being, uproot them, then we can consciously become what we're meant to. And so the idea here is to free up that attention, free up that energy. Then you will have more energy to create what you're meant to create, become what you're meant to become. So I titled this series Addiction to Awakening because I want you to see what you're addicted to, much like what I thought I was addicted to. And in the pursuit of seeing that, that starts to unfold your path to awakening. So when I talk about addiction to awakening, the idea here is let's identify where we've gone unconscious. In other words, what we're unconsciously addicted to, so that we can unfold and start the process of our awakening. Our awakening is not some esoteric destination. It is a daily becoming, right? It's a daily process of becoming more aware, of becoming more intentional, of becoming more purposeful, of becoming more action-oriented, but coming from a beautiful state with that action is the game changer. And so that's why I wanted to lead with this addiction to awakening. So let's first look at the definition of addiction. Addiction is any behavior we do compulsively or repetitively with no experience of freedom to choose another behavior. And so let's talk about stimulus and response here as well. So the stimulus, that's what we're addicted to because we go unconscious when we get that stimuli. So the stimulus hits us and we don't believe we have a choice. That's what then forms the addiction, right? Is because the behavior turns into compulsively doing something with no real experience of freedom to choose. And so think of things in your life as stimuli, right? That request, that's a stimulus. That thing you have to do, stimulus. We are constantly in stimulus, and we don't necessarily believe that there's space to make a choice. And so that's, again, where the addiction forms. So if you think of limitations, right, anywhere where you feel tense, constricted, or limited, see if you can track it back to there was a stimulus which led you to believe a limitation, and that's where you can get stuck because you don't feel like there's the space to make a new choice. So for me, the concept of being addicted to my limitations was something that was new to me, right? Like at first when I thought of addiction, I immediately thought of alcohol, drugs, working too much, classic addiction, gambling, right? Overspending. Those addictions were what I related being addicted to. I didn't necessarily take being addicted into my thoughts or my intentions or my way of being. And so know that if that's kind of where you're at of like, wow, I hadn't thought of my thoughts being addictive, I was very much in your shoes. So you and I are no different on this topic, right? Of seeing that on some level, we had a perception of what being addicted means. And we're just going to bust through that today so that we can really get to the bottom of this together. So think about like limitations. Think about the story of being limited, right? That is something that as people, I mean, we have whole conversations, we have whole conventions around how we are limited and how to be free of limitations. But for you today, think about a time when you have been stuck. Think about a time when you were stuck and see about the thoughts that were going on for you. I am convinced that you can see that those thoughts were being recycled. They were the same thoughts or beliefs, and you got addicted to the feeling, and then you kept repeating it. And now I want to clarify, you didn't intentionally do this. This is unconscious. So unconsciously, you're recycling these thoughts, these beliefs, and they just become so second nature. Again, the stimuli becomes the addiction. So the addiction becomes the thoughts that are so unconscious and so repetitive, there's no space between thought A and thought B for you to make a new choice. And the idea again today is to shine a light on this so that you can start catching them like a thief in the night and end this pattern. So even if you're not necessarily stuck on something, think about something in your life where maybe you keep experiencing the same thing in different areas. So, that could be that you experience resistance with a family member when you try to, make your own plans, or you experience resistance when you try to give instruction to employees in the business. If you can start to pay attention to where in your life things are playing out in two areas, and when I say two areas, I'm talking career, family, home. I'm talking finances and health and vitality. I'm talking different areas of life where you're the common denominator. We want to bring attention to that because that's going to be really helpful as we go forward. So even if you're not stuck, what I want you to just try and bring attention to as we continue on in this episode together today is think about something that maybe you just haven't been able to move through, which is another version of stuck, I realize, but just think of something that may be challenging to you. Maybe you don't view it as being stuck. Maybe you view it as someone is doing something to you or doing something to prohibit you. In some way, you're pigeonholed, right? It could be that you're not necessarily seeing yourself as stuck. You're seeing it as market conditions are affecting you. You're seeing it as, employees are affecting you. Keep that in mind as we go forward. So with addiction, how this relates to blocking you is in some way you believe that you're limited, right? And that is truly the first addiction I want to highlight. I actually wasn't planning on building in another addiction into this episode, but one thing that you can expect from me is like, if it's flowing, and we're putting it in the episode and the show notes, and we want to over deliver and just really give you actionable tips and powerful episodes that just light your inspiration on fire and get you going. So today's first episode is really the mothership of limitations. It's really where everything starts. And like I said earlier, we're going to continue building upon this together. So as we go forward, you're going to notice I'm feathering in the other addictions and even going to reference back to this one. But the number one way that I saw myself addicted, I see my clients addicted, and I'm going to venture out and say you're addicted, is the belief that you are a victim and you subscribe to victim consciousness. So being a victim, there's a lot of conversation around victim consciousness. And most of that conversation is the world is happening to me. Things are happening to me, right? And some way you believe that you're victim of your circumstances, you feel powerless. You feel like you're out of control. And today I want to take you a little bit deeper, because if you notice, all of this language is external, right? On some level, I think they're doing it to me. The market is doing it to me. External environmental things are affecting me. And while I want you to, of course, apply this to that, I also want to take this conversation within. I want to take this conversation to how you are being a victim to you. Because when we, again, operate from the belief that I am the problem, but I am also the solution, you gain an immense power back and can start making change really effectively. So I want to share with you one of the ways this showed up for me in hopes that we can really ground this together. So one of the stories that comes to mind as I was, thinking about victim consciousness and being a victim was when I was in my real estate career, wearing that hat full time, pushing that business forward, and was ready to transition into Truth Teachers and start this business. And one of the things that I went through was several years of a story that I was a victim. And that story that I told was very much around my responsibilities. In other words, I was a victim to my responsibilities. I was a victim to the identity I had created, right, as this real estate mogul professional. And I was a victim to the fact that I couldn't let other people down. What would people think of me, right? There was a lot of, as you can hear, external environment that I was a victim to. But really what ended up happening was that I was a victim to my stories about what was going on. And that's profound, because when I started to see that I was the one perpetuating the reality that I couldn't take action, or now wasn't the right time, or whatever story I wanted to apply to it, I got more and more stuck in the belief that I was a victim and I couldn't do what I wanted to do. And so when I believed that I couldn't do what I wanted to do, what that perpetuated was me sharing with people more about why I was a victim, why I wasn't taking action just yet, why now wasn't the right time. And I could talk all day long about the stories that I would tell. But for you, maybe what you're going through right now is you want to start something new, or you want to expand your current business, or you want to expand on your leadership, or you want to start leading differently. Whatever it is that you identify with, know that the struggle is universal, right? We're all on some level telling a story as to why we're not where we are, which is that addiction, right? Addiction to the limitation. For me, what the addiction was this greater fear, right? The example I want you to kind of visualize, and the image I want to give you is swinging from a tree branch to the next tree branch, but having to let go of the current tree branch and swing with no branches in hand and grab the next one in full faith and trust that it was going to be there, that it wasn't going to be slippery, and that I could latch on and go forward. So like I said, I meddled for years. Like the first inspiration that I had for Truth Teachers was actually in 2016 when I was on a trip to India. I wouldn't go forward and start Truth Teachers until 2020. Now, there's no regret in the process, right? That whole chapter of time made me who I am. But the story that I was victim to why I wasn't taking action was very present. And so the piece that I want you to get here is when we believe that on some level we are contingent, or rather, when we believe we are a victim to circumstance. That's sort of option one or version one of what I mean by being a victim. Version two is how you're playing victim to yourself. What stories are you telling yourself as to why you can't do what you want to do? We forget that if we truly are the creators of our lives, that we can fall victim to the most powerful creator, which is ourselves. And this was very true for me. Having to figure things out, that became the story as to why I didn't take action. And so as you think about victim consciousness, there's many ways that this shows up for us, for you, but really what it comes down to is why you are where you are. And so I invite you to reflect on that for a moment. Are you where you want to be? Because I can guarantee you that on some level, if you're not, no matter what area it's in, no matter what area you feel you're not where you want to be, there is some level of victim you're subscribing to. And if you're willing to look that in the face and take complete ownership that you are believing that story, you are believing that you're a victim, things can really start to change. If you are not where you want to be, there is some level of victim going on. I could list all the ways that's showing up, but on some level, you believe that you're powerless. And to become what you want to become, to achieve what you want to achieve, no matter the category of life, we have to see this truth first, that on some level, to become what we want to become, we have to end the lie that we are powerless to change. And that is how being a victim can really show up. And again, it's very easy to see it in external circumstances. For me, that's where I really started to clean up my life was, wow, if a relationship isn't how I want it, I'm playing victim to those excuses. Oh, wow, if my business isn't where I want it to be, I am a victim with myself and myself only to creating a different result. And if you're willing to see that, wow, the unfolding of my becoming is contingent upon my ability to call myself out where I'm being victim, game over, game changer, that's when you can start to be free, right? Going back to stimulus and response, that's when you can see the stimuli, have the space to reflect and make change instead of respond, create, right? So it's like, instead of stimulus and response, it's stimulus and creation. So I want to leave you with a few tips for you to take away, reflect upon, and share with me what comes up for you, right? I love hearing from you all just about what comes up, what realizations you have. And I just might make more episodes if there's something you want me to go into deeper as it relates to your awarenesses. So here are those 5 tips. Bring awareness to where you might be playing victim in the following ways. So number 1, where do you make excuses? Where do you find that you share with other people why you aren't where you are? And what do you say? Once you write that down, reflect upon what needs to change about that response to create the life that you want. Number 2, where do you believe you don't have a choice? For instance, let's say you want to start that entrepreneurial journey, but you're in a corporate position. You may believe that you have to work that corporate position because you have great insurance. You may believe that you need to stay in that position because of, the long-term retirement that you're vested in. On some level, you're reaffirming you don't have a choice because of those excuses, which is why that's number one. But where do you believe you don't have a choice? Those are the areas I want you to really double down on, because it's not true. You're just subscribing to being a victim. Number 3, what decisions have you been delaying? Is there a decision you're ready to make, but you just don't know how it's going to unfold? Commit to take one action on that decision. And if you want extra credit, make the damn decision, right? Number 4, what are the areas that you find yourself postponing in? Maybe you're really confident in business, but you find yourself postponing having your ideal relationship, or vice versa. Again, bring attention to that and see that on some level you think you're a victim to your circumstances. And lastly, number 5, who do you put up with because you have to? Who, relationship-wise, what relationships are you settling in? Our environment can be so triggering, and that can be reaffirmed by our relationships. And so take a hard look at those, and again, make that decision. But at the very least, just start to see the space between the stimulus, which is that request, and the way you're responding. So I'll wrap up with this reminder. You are the problem, but you are also the solution. Take these tips and what we've talked about today and commit to applying one of them, 2 of them. But most importantly, bring attention to the truth. Where are you subscribing to being a victim? And that attention will start to uproot that unconscious addiction so that you can get on the path to your awakening. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you next week.
Are you experiencing change and breakthroughs as you listen to Becoming? If so, show us some love and hit the subscribe button, leave a review, and share an episode. I love bringing this content to you each week, and together, listener by listener, we can wake up the world. See you next week.